Welcome to episode 25 of Ask Paul Kirtley, where we are going to talk about getting started with carving, exploding rocks, dangerous gases in heated tents, worn fire steels, what to do in those situations, does char cloth have a shelf life, sleeping bag condensation, and Snapchat exercises. What are we doing on Snapchat? Some strange goings on. Find out more in this episode. Welcome to Ask Paul Kirtley, episode 25. Apologies, this is a little later than the usual Friday evening slot. I've been running an elementary course in Sussex, elementary wilderness bushcraft course with a great bunch of guys. I've had a full course this week. Shout out to everyone on that course, including Tom and Mick and Josh and all the other guys that are on that course, Mikey, Wayne. We've just had a really good fun week and I've really enjoyed it. I'm a little bit tired and spoons and shoulders are just in camp getting sorted after that course. We've got a woodcrafter starting tomorrow, so I just thought I'd take the opportunity to record an episode of Ask Paul Kirtley. So if you hear things going on in the background, I'm not far away from camp. You might hear wood being split. The sun's going down very shortly, so the light levels might change. We've got a few planes going over. There's a bird scarer over on the other side of the estate where there's a farm and there's crops, and that's been going popped today. So there's going to be some noises perhaps that pick up on the microphone. But anyway, great to be out in the woods. I've been out in the woods for this whole week, running an elementary course, as I say, and we've got a woodcrafter coming, and it's starting to feel like spring. It's been a weird winter here. It was really quite warm early on in the year and it felt like spring was going to come early, but now we're in the middle of April now and the bluebells are only just coming out. A lot of the spring plants are not really present yet. We've still got daffodils and primroses and wood anemones, which is really odd. Teaching the elementary course where we're often teaching how to identify trees because of the leaves, using the leaves to identify particularly the deciduous trees. We've got very few, and only this week have we got the silver birch coming out. They've literally just started to come into leaf this week, so it's really quite late now. It's been very wet again this week. It's been very wet underfoot. It's wet up in the woods. We've got very heavy clay soils here, and it's the wettest I've seen it for a good number of years. So yeah, really strange weather, but again, just great to be out. Lots and lots of bird life at the moment as well. We had a bivvy over on the other side of the area that we're using here, a few kilometers away from here the other day, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a sunny evening like it is tonight. The birds were singing, we were sat by the campfire, absolutely fantastic. So it's been a great week. Shout out to all the guys on that course, absolutely really loads of fun, lots of banter, lots of laughing around the campfire, particularly towards the end today. We've just been for a couple of beers, so apologies if I sound like I've had a beer, because I have, but very nice of Ronnie in particular. Shout out to Ronnie for buying myself a beer, and to Mick for buying us a round as well, for both of those guys for buying us a beer. So anyway, on with the episode. Getting started with carving. John Bland writes, "Hi Paul, I love your website, blog and YouTube. Thank you very much, John." And his question is, "I would like to ask, this year I want to try my hand at making utensils out in the field, i.e. spoons, etc. What's the best way to start and the best equipment needed for beginners? Thanks, all the best, John." Well, John, I would start relatively small. Start with an eating spoon. If you've never done any carving before, when you say you want to get started with utensils, I'm assuming that you've not done much carving before. You maybe have carved smaller things, I don't know. But if you haven't, start with smaller utensils. eating spoons, butter knives, those sorts of things. Small projects that are easily achievable, that don't take an age, that you can work on your carving skills with. Choose woods that are not too difficult to carve. Sycamore, birch are particularly good if they're green. Don't choose fruit woods or hawthorn or things that are going to be hard to carve. So choose something that's relatively easy to carve. Lime as well is nice and easy to carve. So something like sycamore or birch, which are common, widespread, easy to be found. Lime, not so common, but if you do have some, that's really nice to carve. A little bit harder, maybe rowan or even ash. You can make some nice things with those, but they're a little bit tougher. So start with those, make some small eating spoons. Look at the shape of spoons. Just pull spoons out of your cutlery drawer and look carefully at the shape of them. Try and replicate that in wood. Draw round something if you need to, and work to that shape, work to that design. And then once you can get that down with your carving tools, then you can move on to bigger things. So what do you need? A Mora clipper, Mora companion knife is fine to start carving with. And then you're going to need some sort of spoon knife to carve out a bowl. Svante Jarv makes some really good ones in Sweden, and I probably butchered that name. Ben Orford makes some good ones, and then you've got a standard sort of Mora, less expensive spoon knife as well. So you need something for scooping out the bowls, and then just a general bushcraft knife for carving. If you want some specific carving equipment, get a Mora wood carving knife, one of the small Mora wood carving knives, and they're very, very good as well for carving. You can get more powerful cuts with those, a more specific tool, but you don't need a lot. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and you can carve a lot of great things. Then when it comes to carving larger things, yes, you can do larger utensils, some nice serving spoons and whatnot. I would start maybe with some larger spatulas and those sorts of things, and then, you know, fairly two-dimensional in terms of being flat, but you carving something bigger, and particularly you're going to need to start maybe carving with an axe. So small forest axe or a wildlife hatchet, depending on how big your hands are. Typically for most guys, small forest axe works well. Work the materials in the same way that you're working a knife. Be careful though, the injuries that you get when you cut yourself with an axe are typically worse than when you nick yourself with a knife. So make sure you know what you're doing, but it's generally with green wood carving with an axe, it's a slicing motion. It comes from the wrist. It's all quite close by. Have a chopping block to work on. Chopping block, axe. Cherry's very nice, rowan's very nice. Again, you can use sycamore for your bigger utensils. They're good for making those. And once you've got the gist of making some bigger stuff, then start making more complicated shapes. So some nice serving spoons. After that, you can start working on things like ladles, which are more complicated. You might need to find a piece of wood that's got a side branch which forms the handle and the main bowl from the main trunk of a tree. And you might need to source that wood from somebody who's got access to larger pieces of wood. So a tree surgeon or a forester, or if you've got access to a woodland, then maybe you can fell that yourself. But again, you need to have the skill in order to do that, because felling trees, even moderate sized trees, can be somewhat hazardous if you don't know what you're doing. So maybe source the wood from somewhere else. So that's the way that I would progress, John. Hopefully that helps. And if you need more specific advice, just drop me a line and I can help you out with that. Or jump on my Woodcrafter course when you get the opportunity, because we cover a lot of those things and more on the Woodcrafter course. Running one of those next week, but I'm also running one in early August. All right, exploding rocks. Question from Mark O'Flaherty. And his question is, hi Paul, question concerns cooking on, or more generally heating rocks. I had the experience of cooking on rocks when one exploded, the heated fragments leaving burn holes in my rucksack. Naturally, I'm reluctant to do this again. So any experience of identifying those rocks which are safe to heat for cooking or making a sauna? Really appreciate you taking the time to read this. All the best, Mark. All right, Mark. Yeah, you do need to be extremely careful with heating rocks in fires, because if they do explode, you know, holes in your rucksack are, you know, not the end of the world. Holes in yourself are not great. Eyes are precious. You don't want to be risking your eyesight. You need to be extremely careful with rocks in that sense. It can be like a hand grenade going off in your fire. Rocks that have been wet, rocks that have been soaking in water, rocks that have water inside them, particularly porous rocks, are dangerous, because what happens is the water boils and the rocks can explode. Some rocks as well, like flint, are particularly dangerous because they explode anyway and the fragments are like glass. So avoid rocks that have been in water or have soaked, and avoid flint. You want dry rocks. You want things like sandstone, which is dry. You want granite, which is not been soaked either. Granite is particularly good because it's solid, and that holds a lot of heat. So if you want to cook on rocks, if you want to make a ground oven, or if you want to make a sweat lodge or a sauna or something like that, those type of things are what you need. Just avoid taking stuff, there's the bird scarer, avoid taking stuff from the edge of water and heating it up, you know, from the edges of lakes, from the edges of rivers, because that is potentially going to explode. So hopefully that helps. Short answer, but those are the things to avoid. Dangerous gases in heated tents. And this follows on from some of my articles on how to live in a heated tent. This is from Carlton Blackwell. His question is, hi Paul, I've been a camper all my life since Cubs and have often wondered, now I take my boys camping, should I be taking a CO2 detector with me? We use a tent teepee with a wood stove for heating. Thanks for all the great info you supply on your site. Well, again, you're very welcome, Carlton. Yeah, you do want to be concerned about your kids. You should look after your boys. In terms of dangerous gases in tents, the thing you really need to worry about is carbon monoxide, not carbon dioxide. So a carbon monoxide detector would be a sensible thing. It's a silent killer. The way that carbon monoxide works, as you may know, is basically it binds to your red blood cells, the hemoglobin more readily than oxygen does, and then the oxygen can't be transported around your body and you effectively asphyxiate due to your blood being saturated with the carbon monoxide. It's odorless, it's colourless, it takes you without knowing, and it's a really scary thing. So yes, I would recommend, if you want to be belt and braces in your tent, particularly if you're all sleeping and leaving the stove going, then get a carbon monoxide detector. That would be a sensible investment, and I don't think it's at odds with traditional camping. We have these modern things available to us. Let's make use of them and keep your kids safe. Sensible. I would do that, Carlton. Yep. Next one. Worn fire steels, and this is from David McNeil, and his question is, what do we do once the end of one's fire flash becomes worn? I have been using your technique described in your video, which I will link here on YouTube and in the show notes on my blog, about making really big sparks with great success. With so much practice, I have quickly worn the bottom third of my fire flash into the all too familiar hourglass shape, to the point it does not function as well as it did. He's attached a picture, but I haven't got it here. There is still plenty of usable material left, and my first thought was just to cut off the worn part. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overlooking something before breaking out the hacksaw. Thank you for your time, Dave. No, you can do that. It just ends up being shorter. You can hacksaw it off where the hourglass is. You get some interesting sparks when you use a hacksaw on a fire steel. That's quite fun. So don't do it over your favorite surface or your favorite carpet or anything like that, because you will get a shower of sparks. A hacksaw blade makes quite a good striker for fire steels. So running it across, you're going to get some sparks. Or just wait till it gets so thin you can snap it off. That's the other option. So yes, there's no issue with breaking it off. It's just you're going to end up with a shorter fire steel. But I've done that with some of mine, and then you just wear it down again, and so on and so forth. And after the second time, I usually replace mine, because you don't, the whole ergonomics of the thing changes. So I tend to just replace it after that. But yeah, you're not missing anything. That's what I would do. Next one, char cloth shelf life. This is a good question. This is from Alex Higby, and he's watched every episode, which is very, very flattering. Thank you, Alex. And he has said, he's been a bit of a lurker so far, but he's got a question. He says, I like to use flint and steel for starting fires while out in the field here in Wyoming. And with it, I use char cloth. It's a classic combination and it works very well. I can see why you would do that, Alex. And his question is, does char cloth have a shelf life? I normally use char cloth soon after I make it, but last year I made some at the beginning of summer and did not use it for several months. When I did go to use it, I found it extremely hard to get it to catch a spark. I used all the same materials I normally do and made it the same way. The only difference was the length of time between making it and using it. If you could please answer this question, I would be very thankful. Well, Alex, I think it's quite straightforward. If the char cloth was working well in the first place and then it wasn't working well later, I think it's a case of moisture absorption. There isn't really a shelf life for char cloth, but one thing is it's extremely susceptible to atmospheric moisture. So if you leave it in a shed or a garage and there is a little bit of cold or dampness there, or both, or even just temperature fluctuations where you might get a slight bit of condensation on harder objects, the char cloth, if it's not sealed, may well start to pick up a bit of that moisture. And that's the case when you're out in the woods as well. If you make some char cloth and leave it in a damp environment for a few days with air able to get to it, it can start to really drop off in terms of how easy it is to get it to catch a spark when you drop one onto it from a flint and steel. And the easy way to rectify that is just put it back on some heat and drive the moisture off. So, you know, if we make our char cloth, typically when we make it on courses, we use an old coffee tin, we stuff a torn up cotton tea towel, a tea cloth into there, lid on the fire, there's a small hole, smoke and flames come out. That makes the char cloth in the first place. Once the smoke and flames diminish, we take it off, we plug the hole, leave it to cool, we've got char cloth. But then over time, if it's not sealed, plane going directly overhead there, I'm sure you can hear it. They fly a bit lower when the weather's clear, that's the thing, and it's a nice evening tonight. Saturday evening I'm recording this. Flights coming into Gatwick's not that close, as I've said before, but we do get them coming over. There's a turning beacon over there and then they go off across to Gatwick. So if you're ever flying into Gatwick Airport, you may be flying over the top of me recording an Ask Paul Kirtley episode. But yeah, so you've got this char cloth and it soaks up moisture like a sponge, in the sense that even a little bit of moisture will go in there and it will stop it working so well. So take the tin, put it back on the fire, drive the moisture out, desiccate it again, take it off, let it cool, and it should be working back to the high standard that you'd expect when you first make it. So try that if you find it not working very well, and I suspect that will bring it right back up to the level that you expect. Hopefully that helps. Next one, we're losing the light now. The sun has just gone down. It was a nice sunset over there. Next one is about sleeping bag condensation. This is from, sorry if I pronounced this incorrectly, Kjell Langsgrud. Hello Paul, thank you for your articles. I'm not so good in the English language, so please excuse me for some mistakes. Your English is much better than my Norwegian, so you've got nothing to apologise for. I've tried once this winter to sleep outside in -24 degrees Celsius. I slept well, but my sleeping bag was very wet because of the condensation of breathing. Do you have an idea about how to avoid this? Well, I don't know if we're in a tent, we're in a bivy bag, we're in the forest, we're in the mountains, but generally you get a lot of condensation in your sleeping bag and your sleeping system as a whole, particularly if you have a bivy bag over your sleeping bag, because you breathe into it. So if you tighten it up so much that it's over your mouth, then breathing into it, that is going to put a lot of moisture in, because every time we breathe in, we are moisturizing the air, and every time we breathe out, some of that moisture is lost, and we can put a lot of moisture into clothing or sleeping equipment if we're breathing into that. So the key thing is not to be breathing into your sleeping bag in the first place, or if you have a bivy bag as well, not to be breathing into your bivy bag. The next thing is, if you're inside some sort of bivy bag, then maybe it's not permeable enough, maybe it's not breathing well enough. That can cause moisture buildup on the sleeping bag as well. That's not necessarily due to you breathing into your equipment, that's just got to do with perspiration from your body, and we all perspire all the time. It's one of the things that helps keep our skin supple and not from drying and cracking. We get this imperceptible perspiration that's going all the time, and overnight we're probably going to sweat, perspire, the equivalent of about 1/3 of a litre, about 330 millilitres, about the size of a can of Coke or other soft drink or other soda, however you want to call that. And that's going to exude from us. You often see it down towards the bottom of your sleeping bag where it's been in contact with other things. As bivy bags, you get some moisture build up there, often just close to your upper body as well, where maybe you're giving off a bit more moisture. And then that can combine with you breathing into it to cause quite a lot of moisture around your shoulders and around your upper body, particularly if you've got a bivy bag over the outside of your sleeping bag. So that's largely the issue. It's that imperceptible perspiration combined with breathing that's going to add moisture into your sleeping kit. The only other issue is that if you dress too heavily and go to sleep, then maybe your temperature goes up. You sweat at certain stages in your sleep, you don't realise, and then that moisture in your clothing, if you're wearing a lot of clothing, and your sleeping equipment then builds up, and that can then cause it to not work as well, for the insulative properties of the clothing and of the sleeping bag not to be working as well, and that can then cause you to be cold later on in the night. So it can be tempting to put lots of clothes on when you first get in your sleeping bag, and then you sweat and then it makes it wet and it makes it cold. So you need to manage that carefully and not put too many things on in the first place. If you're cold before you get in your sleeping bag, do some quick physical exercises, do some arm circles, do some press ups, do some squats, get some heat rising in your body. Not so much that you sweat, but just you feel like you're starting to warm up quite nicely, and then get into your sleeping bag. That warmth will transfer into your sleeping bag, warm your sleeping bag up to your body temperature, and you'll be left at a comfortable temperature, and then you won't be tempted to put too many clothes on, and then at some point you won't get too hot and put sweat into your sleeping bag. So those are the reasons why. Just general perspiration, breathing into your kit, and wearing too much to start off with, later sweating, and then later getting the moisture buildup. So if you avoid those things, minimize the sweating, minimize the breathing into your kit, that should help. And if you're still getting moisture buildup, it could be that if you've got a bivy bag around your sleeping bag, that maybe that bivy bag is not breathable enough. But remember, permeable membranes like Gore-Tex, Event, and other permeable membranes like that don't work so well below about -20, because particularly if they are very cold on the outside, the water vapor that would normally pass through the membrane condenses as it hits the inside of the membrane before it's allowed out as vapor, and that can cause a moisture buildup as well, a more moisture buildup than you get at warmer temperatures. So what you can sometimes have to do in cold environments is you have a frost buildup on the inside of your bivvy, if you're bivvying outside in particular, and you need to, when you get up, you have to turn your bivvy bag inside out and pretty much shake off the ice. And if it's a layer of moisture, hang it up in the cold air, that will freeze, and then you shake that off. So hopefully those tips help. Right, the bird scarer is going crazy over there, if you can hear those bangs. Right, last question is about something that we've been doing on, and if you follow me on Snapchat, you'll have seen on my Snapchat channel. If you don't follow me on Snapchat, please do. Just find me as Paul Kirtley on Snapchat. I'll put a link in the show notes as well, where you can go straight and add me. And it's just more video content. Like this week when we've been on the course, I've been videoing little bits and pieces of the course, adding them to my Snapchat, adding some behind the scenes things about what we do in the instructors camp. And it's just an interesting insight for you guys and girls who are interested in what we get up to see a bit more of what I'm up to in the woods. I don't do it every day. Some days I've got good phone reception, Other days I've got no phone reception where we're running courses. So I'll add stuff where I can, and it's generally quite fun. And there's one thing that's caught people's attention, and I'll put a little clip of it up now, of Spoons doing this thing. And I've had a few messages on Snapchat, I've had a few messages on Facebook, and a few messages on Twitter actually asking what the hell it is that we're doing. And I'm not going to tell you yet if you don't know, but if you jump on Snapchat, follow us on Snapchat, we will reveal what this is that Spoons is doing and that I do some days before too long. So I will see you on Snapchat before too long, I hope. It's just good video content, it's good fun. And yeah, say hi when you join me there. Thank you for watching this episode of Ask Paul Kirtley. The sun is going down, the temperature is dropping, it's a lovely clear sky, the birds are singing, and apart from the planes flying over and the bird scarer, it is a really, really peaceful, idyllic, almost spring evening here in Sussex. And I look forward to speaking to you on the next Ask Paul Kirtley before too long. Thanks for watching, take care, and enjoy the spring where you are. Bye.